Elvis Presley was supposed to join Clint Eastwood in a 1970 Western that could have rewritten Hollywood history, but on the morning the contract arrived, he pushed it away with a reason no one in the studio could believe. And the truth behind that decision nearly cost him far more than a movie role. July 17, 1970. The lights inside the International Hotel in Las Vegas burned like a row of tiny suns, glowing against the blue haze floating above the crowd. More than 18,000 people packed the room shoulder to shoulder. Some stood on tiptoes just to see the stage. Some held homemade signs. And somewhere near the back, a fan waved an old ticket stub like a prayer. When Elvis walked out in his white suit, the place shook. It wasn't just cheering. It was a wave, loud, warm, almost physical. You could feel it in your ribs. The band hit the first note. The mic crackled. Flashbulbs blinked like little stars. For a moment, he looked unstoppable. But the people closest to him noticed something different that night. His smile was softer, his eyes a little tired, and when he reached for his water between songs, his hand trembled just enough for Charlie Hodge, standing beside him, to tilt his head in worry. Charlie carried a worn leather folder tucked under his arm. Inside it was a simple message that hadn't reached Elvis yet. Clint Eastwood wants him for a new Western. A real co-lead. A real chance to change everything. The folder never left Charlie's hand during the entire show. He kept looking for a moment to pass it over. But Elvis kept moving, kept singing, kept pushing. The crowd didn't see the strain. They only saw the legend they loved. The man they believed could do anything: movies, music, miracles. As the band slid into Suspicious Minds, something strange happened. Elvis paused for half a second, almost invisible to the crowd, but clear to anyone watching him closely. His breath caught, his chest tightened, and for just a flash, he stared out at the sea of faces like he wasn't sure how far away they really were. The audience didn't notice. They screamed louder, cheering him through it. But Charlie's grip tightened on the folder. He whispered to himself, "Maybe tonight's not the night." Behind the curtains, a small tape recorder sat on a folding chair. Someone had pressed record earlier. A piece of masking tape on the side read, "Offer night, take 2. The microphone hissed softly, picking up distant applause and the clatter of stagehands moving equipment. It was one of those tiny artifacts that later made fans swear the moment was real. When the final bow came and the curtain swept closed, Elvis exhaled as if he'd been holding the entire room on his shoulders. The cheers faded behind the velvet wall. His hair clung to his forehead. Charlie finally stepped forward with the folder. "Elvis, there's something you should see," he said. But before Elvis could respond, a stagehand rushed over. "Sir, your suite called. Someone's been trying to reach you all night." Elvis wiped his face with a scarf. "Can't it wait?" "I don't think so," the man said gently. Elvis sighed, nodded, and walked toward the hallway. The sound of the crowd still echoed behind him, fading like a dream the moment you wake up. He reached his suite on the 31st floor a few minutes later. The city glowed below him. Neon reds, casino blues, endless traffic humming like static. The phone on the side table blinked with a single message light. He stared at it. Something inside him tightened again. A small, quiet warning he couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe fear, or maybe, deep down, he already knew this call was about to change much more than a movie schedule. He sat on the edge of the bed. The phone kept blinking. Then it stopped. It wasn't because the call ended. It was because he never picked it up. And somewhere in a studio office across the country, the people waiting for him had no idea their offer was already on a different path than they imagined. Would you have answered that phone if you were him? What if the ring meant a second chance? Or the start of a disaster? Elvis finally stood, walked toward the window, and pressed his palm to the glass. Behind him, the phone stayed silent, waiting, just like the contract he still didn't know existed. The suite was quiet when Elvis finally returned at 2:14 a.m. The hallway outside still smelled like cigarette smoke and warm carpet, the leftovers of a Vegas night that never truly ended. He walked in with his cape half open, boots dragging just a little, shoulders heavy in a way only Charlie Hodge would have noticed. But Charlie wasn't the one waiting. Colonel Tom Parker sat in the dark like a statue, the TV screen flickering blue across his face. He didn't look up right away. He just said, "Hollywood called." The words hung in the air, soft, heavy, strange. Elvis blinked, trying to understand. Hollywood and now? Why? Parker muted the TV. Clint Eastwood wants you in a Western. 2 leads. Big budget. Warner Brothers. His voice was calm, but his eyes gave something away. A quick, sharp flicker of worry. Elvis set his scarf on the chair. Clint Eastwood? You're sure? I talked to the producer myself. Parker tapped the armrest. They want you on location in New Mexico. 6 months. Filming starts fast. Elvis walked toward the mini fridge, opened it, then closed it again without taking anything. His pulse felt loud in his ears. A Western with Clint. That's real work, Tom. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Real acting. Parker forced a grin. Real problems, too. Tour booked. Contracts signed. Fans waiting. And all this timing. His tone sharpened. You leave now, you break things. Elvis didn't respond. He just stared out the window at the glittering strip below, lights dancing like a carnival that never slept. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Somewhere closer, his own heartbeat thudded like a warning drum. Pattern breaker thoughts sliced through him. What if this is the chance I never got? Charlie entered quietly with the leather folder. Colonel told you? Elvis nodded. Charlie held the folder out. They sent notes. They want you. Really want you. Elvis opened the folder halfway, then closed it. Something inside him flinched. Not fear. Not excitement. Something stranger, like he was standing at the edge of 2 futures, and both were asking him to choose. Parker stood. Look, son, Clint's good. But you're Elvis Presley. You don't play second to anybody, not even a cowboy with a squint. That's not what they're offering. That's exactly what they're offering, Parker snapped. And I'm protecting you. Elvis turned slowly. Or protecting yourself? The question wasn't loud, but it cracked through the room like lightning. Even Charlie froze. Parker's jaw tightened. You think I'm scared of Clint Eastwood? Elvis didn't answer. He didn't need to, because deep down he already knew. The Colonel was terrified of losing control. A 6-month film shoot meant Elvis would finally breathe without him. Think without him. Maybe even make choices without him. And choices were dangerous. Elvis reached for the folder again, fingers brushing the edge. He felt tired. But more than tired, he felt hollow. As if something inside him was slipping out of his hands each day. Charlie whispered, You okay? Elvis nodded. But his voice cracked when he said, I just need a minute. He sat on the couch, the folder resting like a weight on his lap. The room felt colder, smaller, quieter. A single question echoed inside him. If I take the movie, what part of my life breaks? And if I don't, what part of me disappears instead? He looked at the phone beside him. The studio had been trying to reach him for hours. That mattered. That meant they believed he could do it. That he wasn't fading. That he wasn't losing ground. For one moment he felt hope rise. Then Parker said softly, We need to tell them no, before they get ideas. That hope dimmed. Elvis reached for the folder again. But once more he closed it. A small, quiet refusal. A crack in the path he thought he wanted. Charlie watched him carefully. Elvis? What are you thinking? Elvis swallowed hard. I'm thinking something's wrong. I just don't know what. If you were sitting in that room, watching him battle fears he couldn't even name, what would you have told him? Elvis leaned back, eyes drifting toward the ceiling. He didn't know it yet, but the contract was already on its way upstairs. By July 19th, the sun over Las Vegas felt harsh, almost metallic. Heat rippled off the pavement like invisible waves. Elvis walked through the hotel lobby with dark glasses on, but the people who recognized him could still sense something off. He didn't move with his usual rhythm. His steps were slower, heavier, as if each one carried a hidden weight. The 28th floor meeting room smelled like coffee and new paper. Warner Brothers executives sat around a long table, Suits crisp, smiles too wide. Jerry Schilling stood beside Elvis, hands tucked awkwardly into his pockets. He didn't trust this room, and the tension showed in his shoulders. Mr. Presley, one of the executives said, "We're honored, truly. Clint's excited about you for the role." Elvis nodded, polite but distant. "Appreciate that." They slid the contract across the table. $850,000 upfront. Shooting in New Mexico. 6 months. Will provide everything you need. Eastwood speaks highly of you. For a moment, Elvis imagined it. Dusty towns, open skies, riding horses with Clint under the desert sun. A real Western, a real challenge. Something different from the grind he'd been trapped in. But then his voice cracked. Barely. Tiny break. Just enough to remind him of the rehearsal earlier that day, when he couldn't finish a verse without his throat tightening. His doctor's warning pressed into his mind like a bruise. Your body's giving you signs. Slow down. He looked at the executives. They had no idea how tired he really was. No idea how long he'd been pretending everything was fine. A midhook flickered through him. What if the movie isn't the escape I think it is? What if it's the thing that finally breaks me? Jerry leaned closer, whispering, "You don't have to decide right now." But the studio expected him to. The room buzzed with confidence. Pages flipped. Pens clicked. They all believed Elvis Presley was still invincible. They didn't see the shadows under his eyes or the slight tremble in his hands. Then Colonel Parker entered. He didn't sit, didn't smile. He simply placed his hands behind his back and said, "Gentlemen, Elvis has tours lined up, sold-out shows, fans waiting across the country. 6 months away? Impossible." Elvis stared at Parker, surprised at how quickly he shut the door. One executive frowned. "We can adjust schedules." "No," Parker snapped. "He's not a guest star. He's not a sidekick. And he's not sitting in the desert playing cowboys while his real career loses momentum." Elvis felt the sting of that. "Tom," Parker cut him off. "We need to move. The tour is priority. People depend on it. You know that." Elvis's chest tightened again. Not from anger, something deeper. Something like the fear of losing even more control over the small pieces of his life he still owned. The executives tried again. "Elvis, this film could redefine your acting career." Elvis looked at the contract. The black ink felt sharp, almost too bright on the page. It wasn't just a signature they wanted. It was 6 months of his life. 6 months away from Lisa Marie. 6 months away from Graceland. 6 months of pretending he wasn't falling apart. The room started to feel smaller, the air thicker. Jerry watched him carefully, as if afraid he might faint. Elvis placed his hand on the document. His fingertips brushed the edge. But then, like a reflex, he closed it. Quietly, slowly, as though the paper itself burned. Tiny moment, but a devastating one. The executives shifted in confusion. Parker tried not to smile, and Jerry saw the truth in Elvis's eyes. Something was wrong inside him, something he wasn't ready to say out loud. Elvis cleared his throat. "I just need time." They didn't want to give him time, but he stood, ending the meeting. Jerry followed, carrying the contract under his arm like it was something fragile. In the hallway, Elvis paused, leaning against the wall. "What's happening to me?" he whispered. Jerry didn't know the answer, and Elvis couldn't escape the fear crawling up his spine. Fear that he was choosing the wrong future, no matter what he did. He opened the contract again in the elevator, looked at the first line. Then, for the second time in 2 days, he closed it. The sun wasn't fully up yet when Elvis slipped into the small chapel inside the International Hotel. It was quiet in a way the rest of Vegas never was. No slot machines, no applause, just stillness and the faint echo of air conditioning humming in the walls. He sat in the front row, the early light casting thin gold lines across the carpet. A worn gospel hymn book lay open beside him, pages softened from years of use. He ran his fingers over the words without really reading them. His heart felt unsteady, like it couldn't decide what rhythm to follow. The contract waited in his suite upstairs. Everyone expected an answer soon. But here, in the silence, he finally admitted something he hadn't said out loud to anyone. Not even Charlie or Jerry. He was scared. Not of the movie. Not of Clint Eastwood. Not even of failure. He was scared of himself. He whispered into the empty room, "I'm losing control, Lord, and I don't know how to stop it." His voice shook. For months he'd been hiding how exhausted he felt. How the shows drained him. How the pills numbed him. How sleep came in fragments. How his body kept sending warnings he kept ignoring. A sharp pattern breaker flashed in his mind. If I leave for 6 months, I may not come back the same. The thought hit him harder than he expected. His breathing quickened. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The silence felt heavy, almost pressing against his chest. He remembered holding Lisa Marie just weeks earlier, promising her he'd slow down, promising he'd take better care of himself, promising he'd be around. What good were promises if he kept choosing work over his own life? The chapel lights flickered slightly. He exhaled. Then he spoke a sentence he had never once allowed himself to say. "I can't do the movie." The words were small, but they cracked something open inside him. Fear, pressure, exhaustion, all swirling together. He said it again, a little stronger. "I can't do it. Not I won't. Not I don't want to. But I can't." Short bursts echoed through him like hammer strikes. Too tired. Too thin. Too fragile. Too close to breaking. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about fame or money or pleasing fans. He was thinking about staying alive. Birds outside chirped faintly as if answering him. The soft morning light crept across the floor, touching the hymn book, then his boots, then his hands. He felt something shift inside him. A quiet acceptance he didn't expect. Just then, the chapel door creaked open. Colonel Parker stepped inside, his shoes tapping loudly against the floor. He froze when he saw Elvis, eyes narrowing just slightly. "There you are," Parker said. "We need to finalize your answer. The studio is waiting." Elvis stood slowly, wiping his face with his sleeve. "Tom, I'm turning it down." Parker blinked, trying to hide his surprise. "Turning it down? Now listen." "No," Elvis said, firmer. "I'm not well enough. I won't make it through 6 months in the desert. I know it. And you know it." Parker's mouth tightened. "You're overthinking this. You just need rest." Elvis shook his head. "Rest won't fix this. I need time. Real time. And the movie." He swallowed hard. "The movie would finish me." Silence froze between them. Parker looked at him for a long moment, reading the truth in his trembling shoulders and tired eyes. Then something cold flashed in his expression. Something that wasn't concern. "You understand what this means?" Parker asked quietly. Elvis nodded. "Yeah, it means I'm choosing to stay alive." For the first time in his life, he put himself before his career. Before the legend. Before the world. He turned toward the door, leaving Parker standing in the glow of the chapel lights. He had made his choice, but the consequences were already waiting. The news broke before lunchtime. A thin man from the Las Vegas Review-Journal slipped into the International Hotel lobby carrying a notepad and a half-broken camera. Someone from the studio must have leaked it, because within hours a headline appeared in bold black letters. "Elvis Presley declines Eastwood film offer." A couple of tourists read it aloud near the elevators, whispering like they were sharing forbidden gossip. Upstairs, Elvis sat on the edge of his bed with the curtains half closed. The city outside sparkled, but inside the room everything felt dim. He held the unsigned contract on his lap, staring at the empty signature line as if it were a doorway he'd just refused to walk through. Jerry Schilling stepped in quietly. "They printed it already," he said, placing a copy of the paper on the table. Elvis glanced at it but didn't reach for it. "Let them," he murmured. Truth had to come out sooner or later. Jerry looked at him more carefully. There was something different in Elvis's face now. Not the panic from the meeting, not the exhaustion from the shows. Something calmer, sad but clearer, like quitting the film had pulled a thorn out of his chest. A soft buzz came from the nightstand. Another call ignored. Another message he wasn't ready to hear. For once, he didn't feel pressured to pick up. Colonel Parker arrived minutes later, red-faced and breathing hard. "You've made us look unreliable," he snapped. "They're angry. Studio's furious." Elvis didn't rise. "I'm sorry you're upset," he said. "But I gave everything I had this year. I need time to put myself back together." Parker paced the room, muttering under his breath. But Elvis didn't let the words touch him. Something inside him had shifted after that morning in the chapel. Something anchored. He stood, walked to the nightstand, and picked up a small tape recorder. A label on the side read, "For Lisa, July 1970. He pressed play. A soft guitar strum filled the room, followed by his own tired but warm voice speaking directly to his daughter. "Your daddy is trying to slow down so he can be around longer. I love you, baby." Jerry swallowed hard. Parker looked away. Elvis clicked the recorder off. "I made a promise," he said. "Not to a studio, not to a crowd. To my little girl." For a moment no one spoke. Then Elvis walked to the window, pulling the curtain open. Vegas stretched out beneath him, bright, loud, alive. But he knew how different it looked when you were fading inside it. "Tom," he said quietly, "I cancel the next week of shows." Parker spun around. "You what?" "I need rest. Real rest. Not naps, not pills, not quick fixes. Rest." "You'll lose momentum." "I'll lose my life if I don't," Elvis replied. The colonel opened his mouth to argue but stopped when he saw the determination in Elvis's expression. This wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a man who had finally reached the edge and refused to step past it. Elvis stepped away from the window, breathing a little easier. The fear was still there, fear of disappointing people, fear of slowing down, fear of watching the world move without him. But beneath all of that was a small spark of hope. He picked up the contract one last time, ran his fingers across the bold letters, then folded it carefully and placed it into a drawer. "Gone. Done. Finished." Jerry asked quietly, "Do you think turning down the movie bought you time?" Elvis didn't answer right away. He looked at the city lights flickering below, beautiful but distant. "Maybe," he whispered, "or maybe it just helped me breathe for one more night." He reached for his jacket, preparing to leave the room. Before he stepped out, he whispered to himself, "I have to protect what's left of me." And somewhere inside him, he made one final vow. Years later, people still talked about the movie Elvis never made. Some said it could have changed everything. Others believed it wouldn't have mattered at all. But the truth sat somewhere in the middle, quiet, unglamorous, and deeply human. After the rejected offer, Clint Eastwood mentioned the moment briefly in a late 70s interview. He said, "Would have been one hell of a ride with Elvis." His voice held no anger, just a simple kind of wonder, like he'd glimpsed a version of history that never got written. Fans built their own legends around it. Some claimed Elvis had rehearsed lines in his dressing room. Others swore they heard a bootleg tape where he practiced a Western drawl. None of those stories were confirmed, but they spread anyway, carried by people who loved imagining the paths he almost walked. Inside Graceland, in a quiet archive room not open to the public, one artifact still carries the truth. An unsigned Warner Brothers contract, kept in a plastic sleeve beside a pair of scuffed cowboy boots Elvis wore during rehearsal sessions that same summer. The boots are dusty, worn thin at the heels, like they were stepped into only for a moment and then gently put aside. A small brass plaque sits below them. It reads, "Sometimes the roles we refuse define us more than the ones we take." Elvis's handwriting appears on a folded note nearby. The ink is faded but still readable. "I'll come back to this later." Maybe, but he never did. Tour guides say that when people reach this part of the room, the crowd always goes quiet. Even kids stop talking. Something about the message touches people, the idea that even legends have limits, even icons have breaking points. Some visitors leave with a strange, reflective sadness. Others feel a sense of deep respect. It's one thing to chase every moment of fame. It's another to step away when the world expects you to keep shining forever. A small fan club in Memphis still tells the story each year on July 19th. They gather in a rented hall, show grainy photos from 1970, and retell the movie that wasn't. Someone always brings a photocopy of the old newspaper headline. Someone else brings a replica of the chapel hymnbook Elvis used that morning. They don't treat it like gossip. They treat it like a lesson, because choices leave ripples. Sometimes loud, sometimes soft, but always real. And this choice, the one he made alone in a chapel with tired eyes and a trembling voice, still echoes decades later. When you think about your own life, which decisions shaped you the most, the ones you accepted or the ones you walked away from? Elvis never answered that question out loud, but the empty contract answers it for him. The chapel was empty again on Elvis's final morning in Vegas before heading home. The same soft light pooled across the floor. The same quiet hum filled the air. But this time, Elvis didn't sit in the front row. He stood near the doorway, looking at the place where he had made his hardest decision. He wasn't proud. He wasn't ashamed. He simply felt honest. Everything he had been running from, pressure, exhaustion, fear, had finally forced him to stop. Turning down the movie had felt like failure at first, like letting the world down. But the more he breathed, the clearer it became. He hadn't chosen weakness. He had chosen to stay alive long enough to find himself again. He touched the wooden pew with his fingertips. It was warm from the sun. "I had to protect my peace," he whispered, almost like he was reminding himself, "or I'd lose everything." It was strange, he thought, how people talk about legendary choices like they're made with confidence and courage. But most are made in quiet rooms, in moments when your heart is shaking and you're terrified of what comes next. Choices shape us long before anyone hears about them. Elvis walked to the small window and watched the thin beams of light shimmer across the dust in the air. He imagined the world reacting to the headline. Some fans would be confused. Some would be disappointed. Some would never even hear the story. But none of them would feel what he felt now. A calm that had been missing from his life for years. He breathed deeper. He stood taller. He felt human again. If someone had asked him in that moment, "What did you save by saying no?" he might have answered simply, "Myself." Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't stepping into a spotlight. It's stepping out of one before it burns you. He slipped the hymn book back onto the shelf, leaving it slightly crooked the way he'd found it. A small, ordinary gesture. But to him, it felt like closing a chapter he desperately needed to end. Before he left the chapel, he looked back one last time. "Take care of the real you," he murmured. "That's the only part that lasts." Then he walked out into the hallway, heart a little lighter, future a little clearer. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs the reminder that saying no can save a life. And tell us, have you ever walked away from something that looked perfect on the outside but felt wrong inside? Your story might help someone else be brave.